when is the worst time to launch a protest against an authoritarian regime? Is it when you have 2 young children and a pregnant wife? I think it's the worst time. But when is the best time to launch a protest against an authoritarian regime? I think it's when you have 2 young kids and a pregnant wife. In April of 2016, I did something that you could never have paid me to do. I took my phone and I recorded a short video in 4 minutes. I was extremely upset at the way that my nation was. And in this video, I talked about this flag, the flag of Zimbabwe, and what it meant. But I also spoke about what our nation had become and why it was important for every Zimbabwean who cared about Zimbabwe to stand up, grab this flag, and begin the journey of building a new Zimbabwe. I had never been an activist or been involved in politics at all in my life, but I found myself at the formation of one of the largest citizen movements that our nation had ever seen. The government responded as soon as I began to do these videos and these encouragements for citizens to stand up and to build Zimbabwe. And they threatened me. It wasn't until we thought, why don't we organize a protest? But you see, in Zimbabwe, it was illegal to protest, and still is by law, is illegal to protest. But we thought, let's do it in reverse. And what was important for us to do was to get as many people to realize that until they spoke out, civic society could only do so much, and that the opposition politicians could only do so much. And so we started off with a phrase, and it said, if you cannot cause the politician to change, then we must inspire the citizen to be bold. And so we put together a protest where we asked people not to go to work, not to go to school, not to open their businesses, as a way of telling Robert Mugabe that enough was enough. To my surprise, over 9 million people responded to this call. And on the 6th of July 2016, the entire country was shut down. I was deemed an instant threat to national security, and I was arrested. Thousands of people gathered at the courts demanding my release. I only pastored a church of less than 100 people, and yet over 6,000 people gathered outside to ask for my release. Something was happening to the citizens in Zimbabwe. I'll never forget that night whilst I was in prison, the interrogation that took place, and the 2 men that took me away in the early hours of the morning. And one of the things they said to me was, you could get your family hurt. How do you know that at this very point that you are in here, your wife at home and your kids are not being raped? It broke me in ways I couldn't even explain to you. But I made a point that as soon as I got out, I'd make sure that my family was safe. By God's grace, I did get out, and I made sure that my family was safe. I managed to leave the country through a small border in the middle of the night, and my family was evacuated through other means. My daughter was born. She was born in November of 2017. I was with her for a month and felt it was time for me to go back to Zimbabwe, so I made the journey back. I was arrested on arrival at the airport and charged with attempting to overthrow the government. I wondered whilst I was in prison, would all of this be worth it? See, we come from regions and lands where defending democracy demands the sacrifice of one's life. And whilst academics can define democracy, it is people that must defend it. I don't know that my children will ever understand why I left them and had to go back. I was reunited with my family 14 months later. My daughter did not know me from a bar of soap, but I was glad that she was safe and that I had been able to see them again. The inescapable paradox of Zimbabwe's moment of healing is that the doctor was once the butcher. And though a man comes in with a white robe holding a scalpel, you can't shake the feeling that he used to hold the machete. In November, we were able to march, and we inspired citizens. After spending a whole year in and out of prison without my passport, we still went to the streets, and we demanded that Robert Mugabe would step down. We have a future that we're looking to now. It still requires citizens. It still requires ordinary people to put their lives on the line, to stand for what they believe. The biggest thing that we discovered in this journey is that if we could scale the wall of fear as a people, we could begin to see beyond the fears we've had and see a new future and have a new dream for ourselves. Within a few days, Zimbabwe goes to the elections. And the people that supported Robert Mugabe have come to make us promises that they will build Zimbabwe into a new country. But we think that there is another way. We think that we can choose different people. We think that as a people we can unite and together we can chart a new course, but it takes everybody. I want to ask you, as you think about Zimbabwe, to know that we are fighting a battle that we have already been told is impossible to win. But that's what they told me the first day that I recorded the video. They said, you're starting an impossible fight. 2.5 years later, I can stand proudly and say I've played my part in awakening a people to look for freedom. Our new president is saying that Zimbabwe is open for business. But the question that must be asked is Zimbabwe open for freedom? People have asked me, are you not afraid? And in my final statement to you, I'm not afraid of them. But the one thing I am more afraid of is my daughter 20 years from now asking me, Dad, why did you do nothing? Thank you.